Expedition X built its reputation going further than any other paranormal investigation show on television. Real locations, real fieldwork, real evidence, which makes what happened to their banned episode so significant. Because this is not a show that manufactures drama. When an entire episode was pulled before a single viewer could watch it, it was not pulled for being too sensational. It was pulled for being too real. Subscribe and stay until the end, because what surfaces in this video is the footage they spent years making sure you would never see. To understand why the banned episode of Expedition X carries the weight that it does, it is necessary to first understand what separates this production from every other paranormal documentary series operating in the same television landscape. The paranormal genre has never been short of content. Cable television has spent decades producing an unbroken stream of ghost hunting programs, cryptid investigations, and property-based mystery series that follow broadly similar formulas: dramatic music, night vision cameras, investigators reacting to ambiguous sounds in the dark. Expedition X was built in deliberate opposition to that formula from the beginning. The show's foundational premise is that the phenomena worth investigating are not confined to allegedly haunted American properties accessible by a production van and a film permit. They exist in remote corners of the world where local populations have been reporting extraordinary experiences for generations, where the evidence has never been systematically examined because no outside institution has ever committed the resources to reach the location, and where the absence of a television-ready environment is precisely what makes the investigation credible. Phil Torres is the scientific anchor of that premise. His background as a field biologist and naturalist gives the show a methodological framework that most paranormal productions conspicuously lack. Torres approaches anomalous evidence the way a trained scientist approaches any data set, with a genuine commitment to eliminating conventional explanations before entertaining unconventional ones, and with the professional discipline to document findings accurately even when those findings resist the frameworks he brought to the investigation. That discipline is what makes his presence in the banned footage so significant. Jessica Chobot brings a different but complementary dimension to the production. Her investigative instincts are oriented toward the human side of the phenomena the show documents: the witnesses, the communities, the generations of reported experience that predate any outside investigation and that carry a weight of accumulated testimony that laboratory methodology alone cannot fully account for. Her ability to build trust with local sources in environments where outside investigators are typically regarded with suspicion has consistently produced testimony and access for Expedition X that other productions simply cannot replicate. Together, Torres and Chobot have taken the show into environments that range from the jungles of South America to the coastlines of the Pacific to the high-altitude regions of Central Asia, documenting phenomena that include unidentified aerial objects, cryptid encounters reported by credible witnesses across multiple generations, and physical locations where the documented history of anomalous activity stretches back further than any living person's memory. The show has earned a reputation within the paranormal research community and among the scientists and anthropologists who occasionally collaborate with the production for taking its subject matter seriously and for producing documentation that holds up to scrutiny. That reputation is the foundation on which the banned episode's significance rests. A production known for manufacturing drama banning an episode tells you nothing. A production known for rigorous fieldwork banning an episode tells you that the fieldwork produced something that the entire apparatus of professional television was not equipped to broadcast. The investigation that generated the banned footage did not originate through the standard development process that produces most Expedition X episodes. It did not come from a researcher identifying a promising location in the existing paranormal literature, or from a network development conversation about what regions or phenomena would perform well with the show's audience in a given season. It came from a source inside a research institution whose professional relationship with the production had generated reliable leads in the past, a source who made contact with the production outside of normal channels and under conditions of significant personal caution, indicating that what they were passing along was not information they were comfortable transmitting through any traceable pathway. What that source provided was a documented account of a location that had been the subject of classified institutional interest for a period spanning several decades. The nature of that interest, the identity of the institutions involved, and the specific findings that had accumulated across those decades of observation were not fully disclosed in the initial contact. What was disclosed was enough: a geographic location, a category of phenomenon, and a body of witness testimony from the local population of the region that was consistent across independent accounts separated by generations of time. The production team that evaluated the lead spent several weeks assessing its credibility before any commitment to pursue it was made. The geographic location checked out against independent sources. The witness testimony could be partially corroborated through existing anthropological records that predated any institutional interest in the site, and the category of phenomenon the source described was one that Expedition X had documented evidence of in adjacent regions during prior investigations, giving the production a legitimate methodological basis for treating the lead as worthy of serious field investigation. The internal discussions about whether to proceed carried a quality that production veterans on the show have described as unlike anything in their prior experience on the series. There was no shortage of enthusiasm for pursuing the investigation. The lead was compelling by any measure the production applied to it. The caution came from a different place. The source's manner of making contact, the institutional background they referenced, and the specific conditions they placed on how the information could be used all communicated something that experienced television producers are not accustomed to factoring into their decisions. They communicated genuine risk. The decision to proceed was made with that risk fully acknowledged. The team was assembled, the location was arranged, and the cameras were packed for an investigation that everyone involved understood from the outset was operating in territory that the show's prior fieldwork had not fully prepared them for. What none of them fully anticipated was how quickly, once they were on the ground at that location, the territory would make that clear on its own terms. Phil Torres has given hundreds of interviews across his career as a field scientist and television presenter. He is articulate, precise, and comfortable discussing the full range of phenomena Expedition X has documented, including the cases that most challenged his scientific framework. There is one investigation he does not discuss. When questions in interviews have approached the territory of the banned episode, through indirect references to a specific period in the show's production timeline, through questions about whether he has ever encountered something in the field that genuinely exceeded his scientific framework, rather than simply challenging it, Torres's responses shift in a way that is consistent and recognizable. He does not deflect with humor. He does not offer the standard paranormal television presenter's answer about keeping an open mind. He redirects with a deliberateness that reads less like media training and more like a decision made in advance about a specific subject that he has concluded cannot be addressed in a public forum. Jessica Chobot's public record around the same period shows a parallel pattern. A presenter who has always been willing to engage directly with the audience about her experiences in the field, including experiences that unsettled her, went notably quiet on the specifics of one production period in a way that her broader body of public communication does not otherwise exhibit. The indirect accounts that have surfaced about what both of them experienced during the investigation that produced the banned episode come from peripheral sources, crew members who were present but not in the forward position of the investigation, production staff who reviewed portions of the footage during the initial editorial process, and individuals within the research community who were briefed on the findings after the episode was pulled. Those accounts are consistent with each other in their broad outlines and consistent in the specific detail that both Torres and Chobot reached a point during the investigation where their professional frameworks, the scientific methodology Torres applies, and the witness-centered investigative approach Chobot brings, ceased to provide adequate structure for processing what they were experiencing in real time. That detail matters because it is the detail that distinguishes what happened during this investigation from the range of genuinely anomalous experiences both presenters have documented and discussed publicly across the full run of the show. Torres and Chobot have encountered things in the field that challenged them. They have documented phenomena that their respective frameworks could not fully account for, and they have said so on camera without apparent distress. What the banned episode documents is not a challenge to their frameworks. It is the moment their frameworks became irrelevant. The accounts of crew members who were in proximity to both presenters during the relevant sequence describe a quality of response in both Torres and Chobot that those crew members have struggled to articulate precisely. Not fear in the conventional sense, not confusion, but something closer to the sudden and complete recognition that the coordinates by which a person navigates reality have shifted in a way that cannot be shifted back. That is what they walked into, and the cameras caught all of it. The location where the banned episode was filmed has not been publicly identified by any party involved in the production or its suppression. What has been established through the research surrounding the footage's surfacing is a general geographic region and a documented history of institutional attention to that region that predates predates the Expedition X investigation by several decades. The local population of the area has maintained a continuous oral tradition about the specific site that the production visited, a tradition that describes the location not as haunted in any conventional sense, but as a place of permanent and active contact between the physical world and something that exists alongside it without being fully part of it. That description, in various culturally specific framings, appears in the recorded accounts of communities across the region and has been noted by anthropologists working in the area since the mid-20th century without being seriously investigated by any mainstream scientific institution. The institutional interest that the production source referenced was of a different character entirely. The documentation that has partially surfaced through the research surrounding the banned footage indicates that at least 2 separate government-affiliated research programs took an active interest in the site during the latter half of the 20th century. Neither program's findings have entered the public record in any meaningful form. What has surfaced is evidence of their presence, logistics records, communication fragments, and the accounts of local individuals who interacted with outside researchers during those periods, and whose descriptions of what those researchers were doing at the site are not consistent with any conventional scientific survey operation. The Expedition X production was not the first outside organization to send people to that location with the intention of documenting what was there. It was simply the first to bring cameras capable of capturing what those prior investigations had apparently encountered and chose not to put on record. The sequence of events that the banned episode documents begins approximately 40 minutes into the investigation footage, after a standard opening section that establishes the location, the environmental conditions, and the preliminary instrument readings the team recorded upon arriving at the site. Those preliminary readings were anomalous in ways consistent with the location's documented history, but not immediately extraordinary by the standards of what Expedition X had recorded in prior investigations. The electromagnetic variance was elevated. The acoustic environment of the site carried properties that Torres noted on camera were inconsistent with the physical characteristics of the surrounding geography. The instruments were performing the way instruments perform at active locations. Nothing in those first 40 minutes indicates what the following 11 minutes will contain. The transition point is not dramatic in the way television paranormal reveals typically are. There is no sudden spike in a meter, no obvious visual anomaly that the camera catches and the presenters react to. The transition is quieter than that and more disorienting because of it. The quality of the location itself changes. Something in the environmental character of the site shifts in a way that the camera documents in its effect on the people present before it documents any direct visual evidence of a cause. Torres stops mid-sentence during a technical observation about the instrument readings. The silence that follows is not the silence of someone collecting their thoughts. It is the silence of someone whose entire attentional system has been redirected by something that the analytical part of their mind has not yet caught up with. Chobot, positioned several meters away at a different point of the site, turns toward the same area of the location at the same moment without any verbal or visual cue from Torres. What both of them are orienting toward becomes visible on camera approximately 20 seconds after that simultaneous redirection. It is present at the site for the remainder of the 11-minute sequence. It does not behave in any manner consistent with any known phenomenon in the natural world, and it is aware of the cameras. The investigation was concluded without completing its planned scope. The decision to end the field day early was not made by the production team or communicated through the normal chain of on-site decision-making. It was a collective decision that all accounts describe as having been reached simultaneously and without discussion, the same quality of wordless collective understanding that has been described by other teams who have encountered phenomena at threshold locations around the world, and that the anthropological literature on such experiences has documented consistently enough to constitute a recognized pattern. The equipment was packed, and the team left the location within approximately 30 minutes of the relevant sequence ending. The drive back to the nearest populated area was conducted in a silence that crew members have described as different in character from the ordinary quiet of a tired production team at the end of a long field day. Back at the accommodation that night, Torres spent several hours writing detailed field notes that he has never shared publicly. Chobot did not participate in the standard end-of-day production debrief. 2 crew members requested to be rotated off the production for the remainder remainder of the shoot, a request that was granted without the friction such requests typically generate. The physical effects documented in the days following the investigation included sleep disruption reported by multiple team members, episodes of disorientation in the field that persisted for several days after leaving the location, and in one documented case, a medical consultation for symptoms that the attending physician attributed to acute stress response without being able to identify a specific cause. Torres and Chobot returned to production on subsequent episodes and have continued working on the show. What they have never done is discuss that investigation in any public forum. The field notes Torres wrote that night have not surfaced. What has surfaced is the footage, and the footage makes the silence of everyone who was present entirely understandable. The official position of everyone connected to the production and broadcast chain is that the banned Expedition X episode does not exist. No network statement has been issued. No production company acknowledgement has been made. The total nature of that denial is the first indicator that the suppression decision did not originate entirely within the commercial television structure. Discovery Channel has pulled content before, for legal reasons, for sensitivity concerns, for scheduling conflicts that became permanent. In every prior case, the existence of the content was acknowledged even when its broadcast was not. The complete erasure of any official acknowledgement of this episode's existence indicates that the people managing the suppression understood that admitting the episode had been produced would immediately generate questions they were not prepared to answer. The speed of the suppression process suggests outside involvement. The timeline between the footage being reviewed at the executive level and the decision to pull and bury the episode is inconsistent with the operational rhythm of organizations that size moving on purely internal information. Something accelerated the process. The location's documented history of prior institutional interest provides the most direct explanation for what that something was. An organization that had been monitoring that site for decades, that had its own undisclosed findings from prior investigations, and that had a demonstrated interest in managing what entered the public record about that category of phenomenon would have both the awareness to know what the Expedition X footage contained and the capability to ensure it never broadcast. The episode was buried. The footage survived anyway. The copy of the banned episode that has surfaced was preserved by a single individual who was part of the production's post-production process and who made a deliberate decision at significant personal risk to retain a copy of the raw footage before the suppression order reached the stage of the pipeline they occupied. That individual held the footage for an extended period, not from indecision, but from a considered judgment that releasing it prematurely, before the broader conversation around UAP disclosure and anomalous phenomenon had reached a point where the footage could be received seriously rather than dismissed, would waste the only opportunity the footage would have to reach a meaningful audience. The timing of the release reflects that calculation. The footage has been examined by two independent digital forensics analysts whose findings confirm that it has not been altered, composited, or manipulated after the fact. The production metadata embedded in the file is consistent with the Expedition X production timeline. The camera unit identification data matches the equipment manifest for the relevant shoot. What has surfaced is the unedited raw output of a professional camera that kept rolling during 11 minutes of an investigation that changed everyone present. It is authentic, it is complete, and it is now in the world in a form that cannot be recalled. Every episode of Expedition X that has ever broadcast represents a fragment of a larger investigation that the show was never permitted to fully complete on camera. Every location Phil Torres and Jessica Chobot visited, every phenomenon they documented, every witness account they treated as worthy of serious examination, all of it exists within a context that the broadcast version of the show was never allowed to fully establish. The banned episode is that context. It is the answer that the entire catalog of the show's fieldwork was accumulating evidence toward without ever being permitted to reach on camera. Torres spent years applying scientific methodology to phenomena that consistently exceeded scientific methodology's explanatory range. Chobot spent years building trust with communities whose generational experience of the world's anomalous edges carries more evidential weight than any institutional research program has been willing to publicly acknowledge. The banned episode is where that accumulated fieldwork finally arrived at its destination. What the footage documents is not a challenge to the existing frameworks by which the modern world understands itself. It is evidence that those frameworks were always incomplete in a specific and consequential way. The phenomenon visible in that 11-minute sequence was not discovered by the Expedition X team. It was not created by the location, or by the investigation, or by the cameras that captured it. It was there before any of them arrived. It has been there for longer than the institutional programs that spent decades studying it have been keeping records. Phil Torres and Jessica Chobot went further than any other paranormal investigation show on television. The banned episode is what they found when they got there. It has been hidden for years. It has now surfaced, and what it shows has been waiting to be seen by enough people that it can no longer be buried. That moment is now. Josh Gates just walked away from Expedition X. No warning, no explanation to fans, just a cryptic statement about prioritizing his safety and his family. And now rumors are circulating about what might have happened during their most recent filming expedition. Reports of an incident involving a Bigfoot-like creature in the Pacific Northwest, claims that something left the most fearless explorer on television genuinely shaken. Now let's be clear, nothing is confirmed at this moment. Discovery hasn't released official details. The crew is staying silent, but alleged insider sources have been sharing details that, if true, would explain everything. Subscribe and hit the bell because we're breaking down every rumor, alleged detail, and claimed insider account about what may have happened during that expedition. According to circulating rumors, it happened 3 weeks ago during what was supposed to be a standard Expedition X investigation. The team was allegedly filming in a remote area of Washington state, following up on recent Bigfoot sightings reported by local forestry workers. Multiple witnesses, consistent descriptions, fresh footprints documented by credible sources. Exactly the kind of case Josh has built his career investigating. Claims suggest the team consisted of Josh, his co-host Jessica Chobot, Phil Torres, and a production crew of 8 people. They'd reportedly set up base camp in a valley known for decades of Sasquatch activity. By all alleged accounts, the first 2 days were productive but unremarkable. Footprints supposedly found and documented, strange vocalizations allegedly recorded at distance. Then came the third night. According to unverified sources, Josh and Phil decided to investigate an area about 2 miles from base camp where thermal drones had allegedly detected heat signatures. Jessica reportedly stayed behind to monitor equipment. The plan was supposedly simple: hike in, document whatever they found, return by midnight. Rumor has it they never made it to midnight. At 10:47 p.m., base camp allegedly received a frantic radio transmission from Josh. The audio was reportedly chaotic. Claims suggest certain words came through: contact, close, moving fast, Phil's injured. Then the transmission allegedly cut to static. When communication supposedly resumed, Josh's voice was different, shaken, urgent, allegedly calling for immediate evacuation. According to these reports, the production coordinator sent the entire crew to extract Josh and Phil. What they allegedly found was equipment scattered, Phil on the ground with what's claimed to be a head wound, and Josh standing guard, reportedly refusing to move until the entire group was together. But here's where the rumors get interesting. The cameras were allegedly still rolling. Everything that supposedly happened was reportedly captured on multiple devices. And what those cameras allegedly captured, according to anonymous sources claiming to have seen footage, would be the most compelling Bigfoot evidence ever recorded, if true, if any of this actually happened. And these rumors suggest Josh Gates, a man who's spent 2 decades exploring over 100 countries, investigating everything from lost treasures to paranormal phenomena, decided he's done. Not with television, not with exploration, but allegedly with putting himself in situations where he might encounter something like what was reportedly in those woods, because according to these unconfirmed claims, whatever he supposedly saw wasn't a mystery to be solved. It was a threat to be survived. We need to be clear, we haven't seen this footage ourselves. Discovery allegedly has it locked down tight, but we've heard from sources claiming to have viewed it, and their descriptions, if accurate, are disturbing. What follows is based on those unconfirmed accounts. The footage allegedly begins normally, Josh and Phil hiking through dense forest at night, standard narration, Phil supposedly scanning with thermal imaging. Around the 18-minute mark, Phil allegedly gets a thermal hit, something large, approximately 400 yards ahead. They reportedly discuss approaching, and Josh makes the decision to close the gap carefully. As they allegedly get closer, the thermal signature supposedly becomes clearer, upright, bipedal. At approximately 200 yards, sources claim the figure stops and turns toward them, not slowly, but deliberately. Phil allegedly says, "I think it knows we're here." Josh's rumored response, "Good, let's see if it'll show itself." This is allegedly when things go wrong. Instead of fleeing, the thermal signature reportedly begins approaching them, fast. Sources describe the speed as terrifying given the dense terrain. Josh supposedly makes the call to back out immediately. They start retreating, but the figure allegedly keeps gaining ground. Then comes what sources describe as a vocalization, allegedly loud, complex, and close. Both men visibly react according to claims, stopping their retreat. In those seconds, the gap supposedly closes to within 50 yards. Then, according to reports, an object flies past Josh's head. A rock, later identified as approximately softball-sized, allegedly impacts a tree with enough force to embed in the bark. Both men allegedly go to ground, and sources claim that with cameras at ground level, they capture something. All three sources describe this the same way, if their accounts are true. Clear footage for approximately 4 to 5 seconds, not thermal. Direct view, illuminated by camera lights, of something large, covered in reddish-brown hair, with a face showing features that allegedly don't match any known primate, and eyes that supposedly reflect the camera light. The figure then allegedly moves laterally, circling their position. Phil supposedly tries to track it with thermal. Josh is reportedly reaching for rocks. The circling continues for 30-40 seconds according to claims. Then another rock, allegedly larger, comes from a different direction. It reportedly strikes Phil on the side of the head, dropping him immediately. Josh allegedly goes to Phil and makes the radio call for help, while the thermal camera supposedly still shows that massive heat signature maintaining position, watching them. The standoff allegedly continues for nearly 2 minutes before the figure moves away, but thermal signatures reportedly remain at the edge of detection range, as if it was watching to ensure they left. Phil Torres required immediate medical attention. The rock that struck him left a laceration that needed 12 stitches and caused a concussion significant enough that he was hospitalized overnight for observation. But it's not the severity of the injury that's remarkable, it's the circumstances and the projectile itself. The rock was recovered from the scene, a smooth river stone weighing approximately 4 pounds, the kind of rock you'd find in a riverbed, not typically lying around on a forest floor, which raises an immediate question: where did it come from? Wildlife doesn't carry rocks. Bears don't throw objects. The presence of that specific type of stone in that location suggests it was brought there deliberately, but more concerning is the throwing mechanics required to cause the injury Phil sustained. A biomechanics expert consulted by the production estimated that to throw a 4-pound rock with enough force to cause that level of injury from a distance of approximately 40-50 feet requires strength beyond normal human capability. The throwing motion would also need to be coordinated and aimed, not a random toss. Rock throwing is actually well documented in Bigfoot encounter reports. It's considered a signature behavior, territorial warning behavior reported consistently across different geographic regions and different time periods. Researchers theorize it serves as a way to establish dominance and warn intruders without direct physical confrontation. The fact that Phil was injured by a thrown rock fits perfectly into established Bigfoot behavioral patterns. Phil's medical records document the injury, but the official incident report filed with Discovery Channel is deliberately vague about the cause. It states he was struck by a falling object during nighttime investigation in rough terrain. No mention of the rock being thrown, no reference to the encounter, just carefully worded language designed to minimize liability while technically being truthful. Phil himself has been completely silent about the incident. He hasn't posted on social media about Expedition X since it happened. When reached by fans asking about the injury, his responses have been vague. Accident during filming, recovering well, thanks for the concern. The kind of responses that say nothing while appearing to say something. But sources close to Phil say he's struggling with what happened. Not just physically, the concussion symptoms resolved within a week, but psychologically. Phil is a scientist. He's an entomologist and biologist who approaches investigations with academic rigor, having an experience that defies his scientific understanding of what's possible in North American wilderness has been profoundly disorienting. The injury serves as physical proof that something happened. Medical records don't lie. A 4-pound river stone embedded in the bark of a tree doesn't appear by accident, and Phil's concussion isn't a psychological reaction or misperception. Something with significant strength threw a heavy object with enough accuracy and force to injure a human being. That's not folklore. That's documented fact. Phil Torres allegedly required immediate medical attention. According to claims, the rock that struck him left a laceration requiring 12 stitches and caused a concussion significant enough for overnight hospitalization. But reports suggest it's not the severity that's remarkable, it's the circumstances and the projectile itself. The rock was supposedly recovered from the scene. Sources describe it as a smooth river stone weighing approximately 4 pounds, the kind you'd find in a riverbed, not typically on a forest floor, which allegedly raises an immediate question: where did it come from? Wildlife doesn't carry rocks. Bears don't throw objects. But according to rumors, what's more concerning is the throwing mechanics required. A biomechanics expert allegedly consulted by production estimated that throwing a 4-pound rock with enough force to cause Phil's injury from 40-50 feet requires strength beyond normal normal human capability. The throw would also need to be coordinated and aimed, not random. Rock throwing is actually well documented in Bigfoot encounter reports, researchers note. It's considered signature territorial behavior reported consistently across different regions and time periods. If true, the fact that Phil was injured by a thrown rock fits perfectly into established Bigfoot behavioral patterns that have been claimed for decades. Phil's alleged medical records document the injury, but sources claim the official incident report filed with Discovery is deliberately vague. It supposedly states he was struck by a falling object during nighttime investigation in rough terrain. No mention of throwing, no reference to any encounter, just carefully worded language designed to minimize liability. According to circulating reports, the rescue team that responded consisted of Jessica Chobot, 3 camera operators, 2 producers, and the production coordinator. 8 people total, and rumors suggest every single one of them allegedly saw something during the extraction. As they supposedly approached Josh and Phil's location, claims suggest they began hearing vocalizations, not the single scream from the initial encounter, but ongoing calls that seemed to come from multiple directions. Sources describe it as if they were being tracked by more than one individual, coordinating movements around them. Jessica, allegedly leading the group, reportedly made the decision to keep everyone together in tight formation. They moved as a unit, lights sweeping the forest, and according to claims, multiple cameras captured heat signatures on thermal, not just one, at least 3 distinct figures visible at various points during the hike. When they supposedly reached Josh and Phil, thermal cameras allegedly showed something disturbing. The signatures that had been tracking the rescue party had converged on their position. They were surrounded, according to reports, not closely but in a clear pattern around their location. The production coordinator allegedly made an immediate decision: extract and evacuate. No investigating. They helped Phil up and started back, and claims suggest those thermal signatures paced them the entire way back, maintaining distance but clearly following. Multiple crew members allegedly reported seeing eyeshine, eyes catching light at distances and heights that suggested something large. Not deer, not bears, something else watching them leave, if these accounts are to be believed. One camera operator, supposedly speaking anonymously, described it as the most frightening experience in 15 years of filming. Not individual moments, but the totality, the coordinated behavior, the persistent following, the sense that they were being allowed to leave rather than escape. Josh Gates has been remarkably quiet about his specific reasons for leaving Expedition X. His official statement was brief: "After much consideration, I've decided to step away from Expedition X to focus on other projects and spend more time with my family." Standard departure language that reveals nothing. But according to rumors, people close to Josh tell a different story. The alleged Washington State incident supposedly shook him in ways previous close calls never did. Reports suggest he keeps asking, what if Phil had been killed? The rock that allegedly struck him could have hit differently, could have caused a fatal injury. And Josh has 2 young children at home, a wife who reportedly worries every time he goes on expedition. Claims suggest there's also a philosophical component. If Bigfoot exists, these rumors say, it's not just an exciting discovery, it's potentially a predator, a territorial animal with capabilities that make it genuinely dangerous. And sources allege Josh realized that chasing that mystery isn't adventure anymore. It's risk he's supposedly no longer willing to take. According to these unconfirmed reports, Josh isn't retiring from television or exploration. He's allegedly still hosting Expedition Unknown, which focuses on historical mysteries and archaeological investigations. But claims suggest he's done with active paranormal investigation that involves going into remote areas looking for creatures that might pose serious threats. If these rumors are accurate, Discovery Channel allegedly finds itself in an unprecedented situation. They supposedly have footage that would generate massive ratings, clear documentation of a Bigfoot encounter involving their most recognizable host. From a business perspective, airing this would allegedly be a ratings goldmine, but according to claims, they also have a serious liability problem. One crew member was allegedly injured seriously enough to require hospitalization. If they air footage explicitly confirming their crew was attacked by an unknown creature, sources suggest they open themselves to questions about duty of care and safety protocols. Insurance is supposedly another consideration. Production insurance for adventure shows already comes with significant premiums. If insurers allegedly determine Discovery knowingly sent crews into dangerous situations, it could affect coverage not just for Expedition X, but for their entire slate of adventure programming, according to industry observers. Then there's allegedly the question of responsibility. If Discovery airs footage they believe genuinely documents a Bigfoot encounter, they're essentially taking a position that Bigfoot exists. According to speculation, that carries implications beyond ratings, potentially triggering scientific investigation or government inquiries. Sources claim the network has been in discussions with wildlife experts, legal counsel, and possibly even government agencies. Some executives allegedly push to air it, while others advocate for keeping keeping it archived. A compromise position supposedly being discussed involves releasing heavily edited footage with extensive disclaimers. But Josh's decision to quit allegedly complicates everything. If Discovery airs the episode after Josh left citing safety concerns, it creates a narrative that the network prioritized ratings over host safety, according to media analysts. Josh's departure supposedly gives him leverage in how this footage might be presented. The current status, according to rumors, is that Discovery has delayed the entire season. The official explanation is production schedule adjustments, but speculation suggests they're buying time to figure out how to handle this alleged episode and what it means for the show's future. As of now, if this footage exists, it allegedly remains in Discovery's possession, unaired and inaccessible. According to claims, multiple parties have requested access. Bigfoot researchers have supposedly offered to sign NDAs. Scientists have allegedly expressed interest in analyzing the thermal imaging. Even government wildlife agencies have reportedly inquired. Discovery has allegedly refused all requests. The official position, according to sources, is that any footage is part of ongoing production. But rumors suggest the network simply hasn't decided what to do with it. Legal counsel is supposedly advising caution while executives weigh risks and benefits. Some researchers allegedly argue Discovery has a moral obligation to release footage this significant if it exists and is as compelling as claimed. Keeping it suppressed would prioritize corporate liability over potential scientific advancement. But the counter-argument is that Discovery owns any footage and has every right to make business decisions about release. There's also supposedly the question of physical evidence. The rocks allegedly thrown were reportedly collected. Phil's medical records supposedly document injuries from a thrown object. Crew members allegedly provided statements. All of this evidence would exist independent of video footage, but without Discovery releasing it to researchers, it remains isolated and unverifiable, according to claim. Leaks are theoretically possible. If the footage exists on multiple hard drives and has been viewed by numerous people, someone could potentially release it anonymously, though doing so would likely end their career and could expose them to legal consequences. But speculation suggests the temptation must be significant for people who believe this could change how science views Bigfoot. The most likely outcome, according to industry observers, is that Discovery will eventually air a heavily edited version. They'd allegedly include enough to acknowledge something happened while carefully editing around the most explicit sequences. Expert analysts would provide alternative explanations. Disclaimers would emphasize the unusual nature of the incident. Let's be absolutely clear about what we know for certain. Josh Gates has left Expedition X. That's confirmed. Phil Torres was allegedly injured during filming. That appears to be true based on his absence from social media and project schedules. Discovery has delayed the season. Also confirmed. Everything else, the details of the encounter, the footage descriptions, the crew reactions, remains unverified rumor and speculation. But rumors this consistent from multiple alleged sources suggest something significant happened. Whether it was exactly as described, we can't say. Whether footage as compelling as claimed actually exists, we don't know. But Josh's departure from a successful show speaks volumes. People don't walk away from careers like his without serious reasons. If even half of these rumors prove true, it represents a fundamental shift in paranormal investigation, from entertainment to genuine risk, from mystery to potential danger. The footage may eventually air, the full story may eventually be told, or this may remain one of television's most intriguing unsolved mysteries, whispered about but never fully confirmed. For now, we're left with questions. What really happened in those Washington woods? What did the cameras actually capture? And why did Josh Gates, one of television's most fearless explorers, decide some mysteries aren't worth solving? Until Discovery releases official information or Josh breaks his silence, we can only piece together the rumors and wonder what truth they might contain. Sometimes the most compelling evidence is what people choose not to show you. Josh Gates has investigated hundreds of paranormal locations, but there's one Expedition X episode he absolutely refuses to discuss. Season 3 mysteriously skipped from episode 7 to 9. The missing episode was filmed at Poveglia Island in Italy, completed, edited, and then buried forever. Something happened during that investigation that terrified the entire crew. Phil Torres was found in a state of panic with unexplained injuries. A camera operator quit immediately and never worked paranormal TV again. Subscribe now, because what Josh witnessed on that island was so disturbing he made Discovery promise to never air the footage. Dedicated fans of Expedition X who meticulously track every episode, maintain viewing spreadsheets, and follow production schedules noticed something strange when Season 3 began airing in 2021. The episode numbering jumped awkwardly from Episode 7 titled Hunt for the Chupacabra directly to episode 9 titled The Beast of Bray Road, with no explanation, no acknowledgement, and no episode 8 anywhere in the lineup. This wasn't a scheduling quirk or out-of-order airing. The episodes were numbered sequentially with an obvious gap that Discovery Plus made no effort to explain or address. Fan communities on Reddit and paranormal investigation forums immediately began speculating about what happened to the missing episode. Some theorized it was simply delayed due to post-production issues and would air later in the season. But when the season concluded with no episode 8 ever appearing, the speculation intensified. Investigative fans began digging through production databases, filming location permits, and crew social media posts from the time frame when episode 8 would have been filmed. What they discovered was fascinating. Public records showed Expedition X had obtained permits to film in Venice, Italy, during a specific week in late 2020, and crew members had posted photos from Venice and the surrounding Venetian lagoon during that period before quickly deleting them. One production assistant had posted an Instagram story showing a boat heading toward a distant island with the caption, "Heading somewhere we definitely shouldn't be," before that post was removed within hours. Entertainment industry tracking sites that monitor television production schedules had listings showing episode 8 was titled The Curse of Poveglia Island and had a scheduled air date that was subsequently removed from all listings. Press releases sent to entertainment journalists about season 3 originally included a description of an episode investigating Italy's most haunted island, but that description disappeared from later versions of the press materials. When fans began asking Josh Gates directly about the missing episode through social media, convention Q&A sessions, and podcast interviews, his responses were notably evasive and uncomfortable. He would acknowledge the question with forced laughter, make vague comments about not every investigation making it to air, and quickly change the subject. His body language during these moments showed visible discomfort that wasn't typical of his usually confident and open demeanor when discussing his work. Poveglia Island, located in the Venetian lagoon between Venice and Lido in northern Italy, carries one of the darkest histories of any location in Europe, making it both a compelling investigation target for paranormal researchers and a place that many believe should never be disturbed. The island's nightmare history began in the 14th century during the bubonic plague outbreaks that devastated Europe. Venetian authorities used Poveglia as a quarantine station where plague victims were forcibly taken to die in isolation, preventing the disease from spreading further into Venice proper. Conservative historical estimates suggest over 100,000 people died on Poveglia during various plague outbreaks, their bodies burned in massive pyres that created layers of ash mixed with soil across the island. Some areas of Poveglia allegedly contain so much human ash mixed into the earth that the soil has a distinctive texture and color. The island's horror continued into the 20th century when in 1922, a mental asylum was constructed on Poveglia, operating until 1968. The asylum's reputation was dark, even by the standards of early 20th century psychiatric care, which was often brutal and inhumane. Local legends claim the asylum's chief physician conducted experimental treatments on patients, including crude lobotomies performed without proper anesthesia, sensory deprivation experiments, and torture disguised as therapy. According to local folklore, the doctor eventually went insane himself, haunted by the ghosts of patients he'd tortured, and threw himself from the asylum's bell tower to his death. Whether this story is historical fact or embellished legend, the asylum's documented history includes hundreds of patient deaths under questionable circumstances. The Italian government closed the asylum in 1968, and Poveglia has remained abandoned ever since. Public access to the island is strictly forbidden by law, with signs warning trespassers of prosecution and fines. The few people who have obtained special permission to visit Poveglia, journalists, historians, and occasionally paranormal investigators with expensive permits, have reported overwhelming feelings of dread, unexplained sounds, and visual phenomena that defied explanation. Local Venetians refuse to visit the island, and fishermen allegedly avoid sailing too close to Poveglia's shores, believing the island is cursed and that disturbing it brings misfortune. This is the location Josh Gates and Phil Torres chose to investigate for what would become Expedition X's most controversial and ultimately buried episode. According to sources close to the production who spoke anonymously because they signed non-disclosure agreements, the Poveglia Island investigation began normally enough, but deteriorated rapidly into what one crew member described as the most terrifying and dangerous situation I've ever experienced in 20 years of television production. Josh Gates and Phil Torres arrived at Poveglia with a full production crew, including camera operators, sound technicians, safety coordinators, and local guides who had reluctantly agreed to accompany them, despite expressing serious reservations about investigating the island after dark. The investigation was scheduled to run from dusk until dawn, following Expedition X's typical format of daytime location exploration, followed by nighttime investigation using thermal cameras, EMF detectors, and audio recording equipment. The first warning signs came during the late afternoon setup when multiple pieces of equipment malfunctioned simultaneously without explanation. Cameras that had been functioning perfectly suddenly died despite fully charged batteries. Audio recorders produced only static, and thermal imaging cameras displayed error messages that technicians couldn't diagnose or fix. The local guides became increasingly agitated, insisting these malfunctions were signs the island was rejecting their presence and they should leave before nightfall. Josh, ever the experienced investigator who dealt with equipment issues and superstitious locals on countless investigations, dismissed these concerns as coincidence and local folklore, pushing the team to continue with the planned investigation. As darkness fell and the team split up to investigate different areas of the island, Josh and one crew exploring the asylum building while Phil and another crew investigated the plague quarantine areas. The situation escalated from equipment problems to genuine danger. Multiple crew members reported feeling physically ill, experiencing sudden overwhelming dread and panic attacks that came on without warning. One camera operator became so disoriented and nauseous he had to be evacuated from the island by boat, unable to continue working. The turning point came approximately 3 hours into the nighttime investigation when Phil Torres's crew heard screaming from inside the asylum building and lost radio contact with Phil himself. When they rushed to his location, they found Phil in an extreme state of distress that sources describe as beyond simple fear. He was incoherent, visibly injured with scratches and bruises appearing on his arms and face, and initially unresponsive to crew members trying to help him. Phil Torres's experience inside the Poveglia asylum building became the incident that ultimately led to the episode being permanently buried, and remains the aspect of the investigation that neither Phil nor Josh will discuss in any detail publicly. According to crew members who were present that night and have spoken anonymously, Phil had been conducting a solo investigation in what was formerly the asylum's surgical ward, a room where the alleged experiments and crude medical procedures had taken place decades earlier. He was wearing a body camera and had radio communication with the production team stationed outside the building, providing periodic updates about his observations and any paranormal activity he might encounter. For approximately 20 minutes, Phil's investigation proceeded routinely. He documented the decaying surgical equipment still present in the room, took EMF readings that showed some elevated activity, and conducted EVP sessions asking questions into the darkness and recording for potential spirit responses. His radio communications during this period were calm and professional, showing no signs of distress. Then suddenly, Phil's body camera footage showed him reacting to something off camera, his expression shifting from curious investigation to genuine fear in seconds. His radio transmission became frantic. "Something just grabbed me. Something's in here with me. I need to get out." The audio captured sounds of Phil moving quickly through the building, breathing heavily, and at one point, what sounded like a physical struggle or collision with something. Then his radio went silent, his body camera feed cut out, and the production team outside lost all contact with him. Crew members immediately entered the asylum to locate Phil, which took several minutes because the building's interior is a maze of collapsed hallways and rooms in various states of decay. When they found Phil, he was in a different section of the building from where he'd been investigating, seemingly disoriented about how he'd gotten there. Most disturbing were the visible injuries on his body, deep scratches running down both forearms that appeared fresh and were actively bleeding, bruising on his chest and shoulders as if he'd been grabbed or struck, and a cut above his right eye. Phil was in an extreme state of psychological distress, speaking rapidly about something that had attacked him in the darkness, something that had touched him with hands that felt wrong, and had whispered things to him that he refused to repeat to the crew. Medical personnel who examined Phil on the boat back to Venice documented his injuries with photographs and could find no environmental explanation for how he sustained them. The raw footage captured during the Poveglia Island investigation allegedly contains material so disturbing and potentially evidential of genuine paranormal phenomena that Discovery Plus's legal team strongly advised against ever airing the episode. not due to content standards but because of liability concerns and the possibility that broadcasting such material could traumatize viewers or open the network to lawsuits. Sources who claim to have viewed the raw footage before it was locked away describe several sequences that would have made the episode unprecedented in paranormal television. The most significant footage comes from multiple stationary cameras that had been positioned throughout the asylum building to capture activity from different angles simultaneously. 3 separate cameras, positioned to cover different rooms but with overlapping fields of view and hallways, allegedly captured what appears to be a full-bodied apparition of a human figure moving through the building. Unlike typical ghost footage that shows shadows, orbs, or ambiguous shapes that could be explained as dust or camera artifacts, this footage reportedly shows a clearly defined human-shaped figure that passes through camera frames with apparent physicality and purpose, moving in ways consistent with an actual person walking through the space. The figure appears on all 3 camera angles at times that align perfectly with its movement between rooms, eliminating the possibility of camera malfunction affecting a single device. Perhaps more disturbing is footage from Phil Torres's body camera during the minutes leading up to his panic and the loss of his radio signal. The footage allegedly shows, in night vision mode, Phil turning quickly as if responding to sound or movement behind him, and in those frames, something appears in the background of the shot, a shape or form that moves independently and doesn't match any crew member's position or any reasonable explanation like shadows cast by Phil's own movement. The audio from this sequence reportedly captures sounds that audio engineers who analyzed the footage could not identify or explain. Not typical building settling or wind, but sounds with characteristics suggesting vocalization or deliberate noise creation. Most controversial is a segment of footage from inside the asylum's basement area where temperature readings dropped dramatically, over 30 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 2 minutes. While multiple EMF detectors simultaneously maxed out their measurement capabilities, suggesting an electromagnetic event of intensity that shouldn't occur naturally in an abandoned building. One of Expedition X's experienced camera operators, who had worked with Josh Gates across multiple shows and had participated in dozens of paranormal investigations without incident, made the decision to resign from the production immediately after returning from Poveglia Island, and has refused to work on any paranormal television programming since. The camera operator, whose identity has been protected through anonymous statements he's given to paranormal research communities, described his experience at Poveglia as fundamentally different from every other investigation he'd participated in throughout his career. In his anonymous statement, he explained that he'd always approached paranormal television with healthy skepticism, believing that most evidence captured on shows was either misidentified natural phenomena, equipment malfunction, or occasionally deliberate fabrication by producers seeking dramatic content. His role had always been technical: operate the camera, capture quality footage, and let others worry about interpretation and storytelling. Poveglia changed that perspective completely. According to his statement, what he witnessed and filmed that night convinced him beyond any doubt that genuine paranormal phenomena exists, and that some locations should never be investigated because the forces or entities present are genuinely dangerous rather than just subjects of folklore. He described capturing footage that he knows cannot be explained through conventional means, footage he reviewed multiple times looking for rational explanations and finding none. More significantly, he described his own personal experience during the investigation, where he felt an overwhelming presence of malevolence directed specifically at him, as if something intelligent was aware of his presence and wanted him to leave or was considering harming him. The sensation was so powerful and unambiguous that it transcended subjective feeling and became a survival instinct response, every part of his being telling him he was in immediate danger from something he couldn't see or understand. He witnessed Phil Torres's condition after whatever happened to him in the asylum, saw injuries that appeared on Phil's body that had no logical explanation, and heard audio recordings that contained sounds and apparent voices that couldn't be dismissed as environmental noise or radio interference. The combination of these experiences led him to conclude that continuing to work in paranormal television was literally risking his physical safety and potentially his life. Josh Gates, who is typically forthcoming and enthusiastic when discussing his investigations across Expedition Unknown, Expedition X and his other projects, becomes noticeably evasive and uncomfortable whenever the subject of the missing Poveglia Island episode comes up in interviews or public appearances. His careful avoidance of the topic is particularly notable because Josh usually embraces discussing even failed investigations, debunked claims, or episodes where nothing paranormal occurred, treating them as learning experiences or entertaining stories about the challenges of paranormal television production. But Poveglia is different, and his response pattern when asked about it reveals that something genuinely disturbing happened that he's either contractually prevented from discussing or personally unwilling to revisit. During a podcast interview in 2022, a listener question directly asked about the missing Season 3 episode and why it never aired. Josh's typically animated demeanor shifted immediately. He paused for several seconds before responding, his voice losing its usual enthusiastic tone and becoming measured and serious. There are some investigations where what we experience or capture on camera crosses lines that I'm not comfortable sharing with audiences. Poveglia was one of those situations. We went to a place with an incredibly dark history, and what happened there convinced me that some locations should be off limits, regardless of their potential for paranormal evidence. When the interviewer pressed for more details, Josh politely but firmly declined to elaborate, stating only that everyone who was there that night understands why the episode won't air, and I've asked the network to permanently archive that footage. At a paranormal convention in 2023, during a Q&A session, an audience member asked if Josh had ever been genuinely frightened during an investigation rather than just experiencing the thrill of exploring spooky locations. Josh's response referenced Poveglia without naming it directly. There's been one investigation where I experienced genuine fear, not the fun Halloween haunted house feeling, but actual terror that something dangerous was present and aware of us. That investigation ended with a crew member injured, and I made the decision to evacuate rather than continue filming. It's the only time in my career I've done that. Body language experts who analyzed video footage of Josh discussing the episode noted consistent stress indicators, reduced eye contact, defensive posture, and verbal deflection techniques that suggested he was protecting information he found difficult to discuss. The Poveglia Island investigation fundamentally changed how Expedition X approaches location selection, safety protocols, and the well-being of cast and crew in ways that became evident in seasons following the incident. Viewers who carefully watch post-Poveglia episodes notice significant operational differences that weren't present in earlier seasons, suggesting the production company and network implemented new policies specifically in response to what happened in Italy. The most obvious change is the addition of a dedicated safety coordinator role that didn't exist in earlier seasons. This person, typically someone with emergency medical training and crisis management experience, is now present at every investigation regardless of location. Their responsibility is monitoring the physical and psychological condition of all personnel during investigations and has explicit authority to halt filming if they determine anyone's health or safety is at risk. This represents a significant shift from the previous approach where production decisions were made by directors and producers focused primarily on capturing compelling content. Location vetting procedures became substantially more rigorous after Poveglia. Earlier seasons of Expedition X featured investigations at locations chosen primarily for their paranormal reputation and visual appeal, with relatively minimal research into the specific history or potential dangers beyond basic historical facts. Post-Poveglia episodes show evidence of much more thorough advanced research, including consultation with local authorities, interviews with previous investigators who visited the locations, and psychological assessments of whether locations have histories so traumatic that investigation might be ethically questionable, regardless of paranormal potential. Several planned investigations for Season 4 were canceled during pre-production, after this enhanced vetting process identified them as too similar to Poveglia in terms of historical trauma or previous investigator experiences. Phil Torres's participation in the show changed noticeably after Poveglia. While he continued working on Expedition X, sources say he initially refused to return for Season 4 and only agreed after extensive conversations with Josh Gates and substantial changes to his contract. These changes allegedly include Phil having veto power over any investigation he deems too dangerous, the right to leave any location immediately if he feels unsafe without production pressure to continue, and the presence of a dedicated safety coordinator who monitors his well-being specifically during solo investigation segments. Episodes filmed after Poveglia show Phil rarely conducting extended solo investigations in the most dangerous or allegedly active areas of locations, a departure from earlier seasons where solo investigation segments were common. Josh Gates has traveled to over 100 countries, explored the most remote corners of Earth, and investigated mysteries that would terrify most people. But there's one expedition he rarely talks about, a journey into the Congo that nearly cost him his life. What started as a search for a legendary cryptid turned into a nightmare of militia ambushes, life-threatening diseases, equipment failures in hostile territory, and a desperate survival situation deep in one of the world's most dangerous jungles. The cameras captured everything as Josh faced armed soldiers, contracted a mystery illness that shut down his organs, and made impossible decisions about whether to abandon the investigation or risk his crew's lives. This wasn't entertainment. This was survival. Hit subscribe because what happened on this expedition reveals the terrifying reality behind adventure television that networks don't want you to see. When Josh Gates received credible intelligence in 2009 about Mokele Mbembe sightings in the Republic of Congo's Likwala swamps, the Destination Truth host recognized this represented cryptozoology's most compelling case for surviving dinosaur populations, based on hundreds of consistent eyewitness accounts from indigenous tribes spanning centuries, missionary documentation dating to the 1700s describing massive long-necked creatures unlike any known animals, and even alleged photographic evidence from previous scientific expeditions that suggested something genuinely anomalous existed in one of Earth's last truly unexplored regions. The Likwala region presented challenges unlike anything Josh had encountered in dozens of international investigations, including millions of acres of dense swampland accessible only by dugout canoe, through winding waterways with no roads, no infrastructure, virtually no contact with modern civilization, and local tribes maintaining unchanged traditions for thousands of years while speaking languages rarely documented by linguists. What differentiated this expedition from typical Destination Truth episodes involved compounding danger factors, including ongoing civil conflict with multiple armed militias controlling different territories, endemic diseases including malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, river blindness, and numerous parasitic infections, wildlife including hippos responsible for more African deaths than any other large animal, Nile crocodiles, venomous snakes, and aggressive primates, plus environmental hostility featuring temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity near 100%, and terrain that could swallow equipment and people without trace. Sci-Fi Network executives initially hesitated approving the expedition due to safety concerns and logistical impossibilities because typical Destination Truth production budgets assumed locations with basic infrastructure like airports, hotels, vehicle rentals, and guides familiar with tourism, whereas Congo required completely different preparation, including armed security personnel, emergency medical evacuation plans involving military contractors, specialized equipment designed for extreme tropical conditions, backup communication systems for when primary satellite phones failed, and insurance policies covering kidnapping, ransom, and emergency extraction from hostile territory. Josh pushed aggressively for approval, arguing Mokele Mbembe represented cryptozoology's most credible case, worthy of genuine scientific investigation beyond entertainment value. Assembling specialist crew, including tropical medicine experts, conflict zone security consultants, wildlife biologists familiar with Congo ecosystems, and regular Destination Truth team members experienced in difficult locations. Preparation consumed 6 months involving tropical disease vaccinations, anti-malarial medication regimens, psychological evaluation ensuring Josh could handle stress of leading teams into genuinely dangerous territory, hostile environment training covering militia encounters, emergency medical procedures for treating gunshot wounds and tropical diseases in field conditions, and jungle survival skills for scenarios where extraction became impossible. What none of them understood was that no amount of preparation could protect them from what awaited in the Likwala swamps. The expedition began deteriorating before Josh and his 12-person crew even reached the investigation site, starting with arrival in Brazzaville, where government permits supposedly approved and waiting were mysteriously absent, with officials who'd confirmed arrangements weeks earlier now claiming no knowledge and demanding substantial additional payments before issuing any documentation. This corruption was familiar to Josh from other developing nations, but timeline pressure created urgency, because they had narrow dry season windows when river travel was possible, and delays of even days could make the expedition impossible, forcing Josh's difficult decision to pay bribes that devastated production budgets but seemed the only option for proceeding. Securing reliable local guides proved equally problematic because professional expedition guides operating in Congo were already contracted to mining companies or scientific research teams, leaving only guides with questionable experience and concerning reputations, including one accused of abandoning previous expeditions when militia problems arose and another rumored to have connections with armed groups, possibly using legitimate expeditions as cover for smuggling operations. Equipment failures emerged immediately, with specialized waterproof camera housings designed to protect gear in extreme humidity failing within hours as condensation formed inside supposedly sealed cases, threatening tens of thousands of dollars in electronics, satellite communication systems experiencing intermittent connection problems that technicians couldn't diagnose or repair, and backup batteries showing reduced capacity in extreme heat, meaning less recording time than planned. Medical issues started before leaving Brazzaville when 2 crew members developed severe gastrointestinal illness from contaminated food or water, despite precautions, with the tropical medicine specialist diagnosing probable bacterial infection and starting aggressive antibiotic treatment. Though affected crew remained significantly weakened, Josh faced his first major decision: whether to delay until everyone recovered, potentially missing weather windows, or proceed with reduced team. Choosing to continue reasoning the medical specialist could manage situations, and turning back meant wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars for nothing. The 5-day river journey into Likwala using traditional dugout canoes modified with small outboard motors proved brutally difficult, because these narrow, unstable craft required constant attention to balance and could capsize if weight shifted suddenly, with the team traveling with all equipment, camping gear, food supplies, and medical supplies distributed across 4 canoes, where one capsizing could mean loss of critical equipment or drowning in crocodile-infested waters. During the 2nd day, the team encountered their first militia checkpoint, where armed men in mismatched military uniforms emerged from jungle ordering canoes to shore, claiming to be government soldiers, though Pascal whispered these were likely rebels operating independently, with the militia demanding to inspect all equipment, ostensibly searching for weapons, but clearly looking for items to confiscate. After 2 hours of tense negotiation with armed men who could kill them all with no consequences, the militia accepted payment, essentially robbery disguised as fees, and allowed them to continue, establishing the team as wealthy foreigners willing to pay and making them targets for every other militia group in the region. Reaching the investigation site in deep Likwala swamps required abandoning canoes and proceeding on foot through terrain that seemed deliberately designed to destroy human intruders, with the jungle being not solid ground with trees but semi-aquatic environment where water, mud, and vegetation created unstable surfaces that could swallow equipment and people, requiring every step to test ground. Though even then, crew members would suddenly sink waist-deep into mud concealed by vegetation, needing assistance to extract themselves while keeping expensive equipment above water. Heat and humidity exceeded anything Josh had experienced in years of expedition work, with clothing completely soaked within minutes of exertion and dehydration becoming immediate concern despite carrying substantial water supplies, because human bodies simply cannot hydrate fast enough to replace water lost through sweat in those conditions, resulting in the team drinking 4 to 6 liters per person daily while still showing dehydration signs, including headaches, dizziness, and reduced cognitive function. Insects presented constant nightmare conditions, with mosquitoes swarming in clouds so dense crew members inhaled them while breathing, and despite DEET concentrations strong enough to melt plastic, mosquitoes still landed and bit, transmitting unknown diseases. Tsetse flies delivered incredibly painful bites that swelled and itched for days, and ants were everywhere, including army ants swarming over anything that stopped moving, fire ants delivering burning stings, and countless species that bit, stung, or crawled over every surface, making rest impossible. Wildlife presented continuous danger, with hippos responsible for more human deaths in Africa than any other large animal, using the same waterways the team needed to navigate, their territorial aggressive nature meaning immediate retreat and long detours around their territories, while crocodiles were visible in every substantial body of water, with eyes reflecting camera lights at night like floating lanterns, and several venomous snake species, including black mambas and cobras, meant every step required watching foot placement, and every overhead branch could potentially hold death. The most dangerous wildlife was smaller and less visible, including parasites in water water that could penetrate skin, causing infections or infestations that might not show symptoms for weeks or months, leeches attaching during every water crossing requiring careful removal to prevent infection, and microscopic organisms causing skin rashes, fungal infections, and mysterious ailments the team's medical specialist couldn't immediately identify. Navigation became problematic almost immediately because GPS units functioned poorly under dense jungle canopy, providing coordinates that jumped erratically or simply failed to acquire satellite signals. Traditional navigation using compass and map was difficult in terrain with no landmarks and no long sight lines, and the team relied heavily on Pascal's claimed knowledge. Though it became increasingly apparent, even Pascal was uncertain of exact locations or best routes to destinations. Food supplies ran low faster than anticipated because difficult terrain meant progress was far slower than planned, with distances appearing as one day's travel on maps, taking 3 or 4 days in reality. And the team had brought high-calorie expedition food designed for planned trip duration, but at actual progress rates, supplies would run out before completing investigation and returning to civilization. When the team finally reached what Pascal identified as Mokale Mbembe territory, consisting of series of deep pools connected by narrow channels in dense swamp after 8 days in jungle, they were behind schedule, running low on supplies, morale declining, and everyone showing physical deterioration including weight loss, infected insect bites, rashes, and general exhaustion. But they'd come too far to turn back without attempting the investigation they'd risked everything to conduct. The investigation site differed dramatically from typical alleged cryptid habitats that usually show no compelling evidence, being just forests or lakes looking like any other wilderness area with nothing suggesting unusual wildlife. Because this location had genuinely strange characteristics, including deep pools that were circular and perfectly formed as if created by something large, repeatedly using the same wallows. Massive scratch marks scoring trees at heights of 10 to 15 feet far too high for any known regional animal, and local villagers absolutely refusing to approach the area, showing genuine fear rather than performative superstition Josh had encountered elsewhere. The team deployed camera traps around pools using motion-activated systems designed to record any passing animals, positioned underwater cameras in murky water, though visibility was so poor they could see only feet ahead, and established base camp approximately 500 meters from pools far enough to avoid disturbing wildlife, but close enough to respond quickly if cameras detected movement. On the second investigation night, the camera traps recorded something showing footage of movement in water, where something large created substantial displacement and waves rippling across the pool. Thermal imaging cameras detected heat signature consistent with large warm-blooded animal, though shape was indistinct through vegetation, and audio recordings captured deep resonant vocalizations. The wildlife biologist couldn't match to any known Congo species, with sounds being low frequency almost below human hearing, creating physical vibrations felt in the chest. Josh's scientific training and years of investigation experience made him naturally skeptical of cryptid evidence because he'd investigated dozens of alleged monster sightings, finding mundane explanations for nearly all. But this evidence was different because the thermal signature showed mass larger than any hippo moving through water with controlled purposeful motion rather than splashing chaos of frightened wildlife, and vocalizations had acoustic properties suggesting they were produced by large resonating chamber, meaning big animal with substantial lung capacity. The team decided to attempt direct observation approaching pools before dawn, hoping to catch whatever created the disturbance during its most active period, with Josh wading into murky water with waterproof camera feeling with feet for drop-offs and obstacles, while the water was warm, thick with sediment, and visibility essentially zero, meaning he operated entirely by feel, completely vulnerable to whatever might be beneath the surface. Then something grabbed his leg, not bumped or brushed against, but grabbed with what felt like incredible strength, causing Josh's immediate pure terror reaction because he was waist-deep in opaque water and crocodile habitat, and something had him, and he tried pulling away, but the grip held for seconds before releasing, causing him to scramble backward toward shore, certain he was about to be dragged under and killed, with examination revealing deep marks looking like pressure points from something with large grip circumference, not teeth marks or claw scratches, but pressure marks suggesting something wrapped around his lower leg and squeezed. On the 10th day in jungle, Josh woke up feeling fundamentally wrong, not regular expedition fatigue or mild illness, but something systemically wrong with his body at cellular level, experiencing fever that made skin feel like burning from inside, chills so severe his teeth chattered despite tropical heat, and muscle aches so intense that moving felt like bones grinding against each other. and when he tried standing, he immediately collapsed, too weak to support his own weight. The team's medical specialist, Dr. Sarah Chen, immediately began diagnostics, finding temperature at 104 degrees Fahrenheit and rising, heart rate elevated and irregular, blood pressure dangerously low, breathing rapid and shallow, and she ran through likely culprits, with malaria being obvious first suspect given mosquito exposure. Though Josh had been on aggressive anti-malarial prophylaxis, dengue fever was possible, as were numerous other tropical diseases. But the problem was many tropical illnesses present with similar initial symptoms, and without laboratory testing, exact diagnosis was impossible. Dr. Chen started empirical treatment, including broad-spectrum antibiotics in case of bacterial infection, anti-malarial medications despite the prophylaxis, and IV fluids to combat dehydration from fever. But Josh's condition deteriorated rather than improved, with him experiencing confusion and disorientation within hours, suggesting the illness was affecting his brain, difficulty focusing eyes, slurred speech, and most alarming to Dr. Chen were signs his organs might be shutting down, including reduced urine output, suggesting kidney problems, and yellowing of eyes, suggesting liver involvement. The team faced critical emergency decision because Josh needed hospital-level medical care immediately, but they were 5 days of difficult jungle travel from nearest clinic, barely qualifying as medical facility, and another 2 days beyond that to reach hospital with modern diagnostic equipment, and the satellite phone was working, allowing emergency extraction calls. But medical evacuation from this location would require helicopter capable of jungle penetration, which was expensive, dangerous, and requiring 24 to 48 hours minimum to arrange and execute. Dr. Chen's professional assessment was blunt, stating Josh was critically ill with something she couldn't diagnose in field conditions. His condition was deteriorating rapidly, and without intervention he could die, with the words "could die" making the situation brutally clear that this wasn't adventure television anymore, but medical emergency in one of Earth's most remote locations with genuinely life or death stakes. Josh, in his moments of lucidity between fever-induced confusion, made the decision to attempt evacuation on foot rather than waiting for helicopter extraction that might not arrive in time. And it was a terrible choice, because moving someone in his condition through jungle would be extremely dangerous and could worsen his condition, but waiting could be fatal if illness progressed faster than help could arrive. The team abandoned all non-essential equipment, keeping only medical supplies, communication gear, and one camera to document what was happening, constructed makeshift stretcher, and began desperate journey back towards civilization, with 4 team members carrying Josh in rotation while others managed equipment and navigation. And their pace would be far slower than incoming journey because of stretcher, but they had no choice, because staying meant Josh would die in the jungle. On the 4th day of evacuation march, when the team was exhausted and still 2 days from nearest village with medical capability, armed militia emerged from jungle vegetation surrounding them in coordinated ambush pattern, making clear this was not random encounter, but deliberate targeting of vulnerable foreigners. Approximately 15 armed men carrying AK-47 rifles and machetes, with their leader speaking French heavily accented with local languages, demanded to know what the team was doing in his territory and why they were carrying someone on stretcher. The situation was worse than earlier checkpoint encounter, because the team was exhausted, carrying critically ill man, completely at mercy of armed men who operated outside any law, where the militia leader could rob, kill, or kidnap them with zero consequences. The standoff lasted hours, with militia examining belongings while keeping weapons trained on the group, until Josh's condition took dramatic turn, beginning to seize with violent convulsions requiring multiple people to restrain him, and Dr. Chen screaming he was dying. Something about watching someone have life-threatening medical emergency affected the militia leader, whose demeanor changed as he ordered men to lower weapons and helped clear space for treatment. Then, after Josh was stabilized, decided to provide guides leading them to nearest village by fastest route, cutting full day off travel time without charging them. With militia guides' help, they reached village clinic in 18 hours instead of projected 2 days, finding primitive concrete building with limited medications, but nurse who'd treated hundreds of tropical disease cases and recognized Josh's symptom pattern as severe falciparum malaria, the deadliest strain that kills by causing infected red blood cells to clump, blocking blood flow to organs, explaining why his kidneys and liver were failing despite anti-malarial prophylaxis. The nurse started aggressive IV artesunate treatment, explaining bluntly the next 48 hours would determine whether Josh lived or died, because if organs had sustained irreversible irreversible damage. No medication would save him. Josh remained mostly unconscious or delirious for 2 days while his body fought infection, with fever spiking to dangerous levels requiring ice packs and constant monitoring. Breathing becoming so labored, Dr. Chen prepared to perform emergency airway management, and heart rhythm becoming irregular enough the team worried about cardiac arrest. On the 3rd day, Josh's fever finally broke and he regained consciousness, weak and disoriented but alive, with lab tests showing kidneys and liver beginning to recover function, suggesting he would survive, though complete recovery would take weeks or months. The team prepared for evacuation, knowing they were abandoning investigation, incomplete, having lost equipment and having nothing to show except footage of Josh nearly dying. When production team reviewed hundreds of hours of Congo expedition footage after Josh's recovery, they discovered sequences documenting genuine unknown animal activity, including thermal imaging showing heat signature of large warm-blooded creature with mass exceeding any known regional animal, audio recordings of deep vocalizations wildlife experts couldn't match to cataloged species, underwater camera footage showing dark mass moving past approximately 1 second before Josh was grabbed, and most compelling was footage of Josh's leg showing deep pressure marks spaced too far apart to match any known Congo animal's grip pattern. Cryptozoology experts and wildlife biologists who analyzed the evidence reached consensus that something large and unidentified was present in that location, though exact identification was impossible from available evidence. However, sci-fi executives determined the episode could not be broadcast as planned because approximately 60% documented Josh's medical emergency, showing him delirious, seizing, being carried on stretcher barely conscious, and raw terror on crew faces as they realized he might die, with network lawyers expressing concern that airing footage of host experiencing genuine life-threatening illness could create liability issues, suggesting the network prioritized ratings over employee safety, making the medical footage too real and disturbing for entertainment television. Josh Gates has built an empire in paranormal television. From Destination Truth to Expedition Unknown to Expedition X, he's become one of the most recognizable faces in adventure programming. But something has been happening behind the scenes that fans are just now starting to piece together. Cryptic social media posts, canceled appearances, and unusual silence from the usually charismatic host have sparked concern across the paranormal community. Industry insiders are whispering about major changes at Discovery Plus, and Josh's name keeps coming up in those conversations. What he's about to announce will change everything, not just for Expedition X, but for the entire landscape of paranormal television. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed because this story is developing rapidly and you won't want to miss what happens next. This is the news Josh Gates is breaking. The first warning sign came in late October when Josh Gates abruptly canceled his scheduled appearance at Paracon in Portland. Fans who had paid premium prices for meet and greets received generic apology emails citing unforeseen scheduling conflicts. This was unusual for Josh, who has built his reputation on being accessible and appreciative of his fan base. Then came the social media silence. Josh, who typically posts multiple times weekly with behind-the-scenes content and location updates, went dark for nearly 3 weeks. When he finally resurfaced, the posts felt different. Carefully curated promotional material with none of his signature humor or personal touch. Longtime followers noticed immediately. Reddit threads exploded with speculation. "Where's the real Josh?" one fan asked. His Instagram stories, usually filled with travel adventures and dad jokes, became sporadic and oddly formal. Industry insiders began sharing whispers at conventions and on private message boards. A production assistant who worked on Expedition Unknown posted cryptically about massive changes coming, before quickly deleting the tweet. Camera operators and location scouts started updating their LinkedIn profiles, a telltale sign that crew members were preparing for career transitions. Josh's usually active engagement with fans on Twitter stopped entirely. No responses to questions, no retweets of fan art, no interaction whatsoever. Even his traditional birthday post thanking fans came weeks late and felt rushed. Most tellingly, promotional interviews for the new Expedition X season featured Phil Torres alone, with Josh appearing only via pre-recorded segments. Something was clearly wrong, and the paranormal community was about to discover just how deep this went. Anyone who has watched Expedition X from the beginning knows the chemistry between Josh Gates and Phil Torres was the show's foundation. Their banter, mutual respect, and complementary skills made every investigation feel authentic and engaging. But careful viewers noticed a shift during Season 4. The playful back and forth became forced. Moments that should have sparked excitement felt awkward and rehearsed. In the Mothman episode, there's a notable scene where Phil makes a discovery and turns to share it with Josh, only to find him distracted and checking his phone. The camera lingers for an uncomfortable beat before cutting away. That wasn't scripted. Production sources reveal that filming schedules became increasingly chaotic. Josh would arrive late to locations, sometimes missing entire investigation setups that Phil had spent hours preparing. What used to be collaborative planning sessions became Phil working with producers while Josh participated via video calls. The Romania investigation that was supposed to film in August got pushed to October, then November, with multiple date changes that created logistical nightmares for the entire crew. On-set tension became palpable. Crew members reported overhearing heated discussions about creative direction and time commitments. Josh wanted to scale back Expedition X filming to focus on other projects. Phil, who had built his career around the show, pushed back hard. Their professional relationship, once genuine friendship, became strictly business. Watch the Season 4 finale closely. During the final group discussion, Josh and Phil barely make eye contact. Their body language speaks volumes. Turned slightly away from each other, forced smiles, scripted dialogue that lacks their usual spontaneity. One crew member described the atmosphere as watching a marriage fall apart in real time. The show continued, but the magic was dying, and both men knew it. To understand Josh's decision, you need to understand the chaos happening at Discovery+. The 2022 merger between Discovery and Warner Bros. Created Warner Bros. Discovery, a massive media conglomerate with redundant programming and bloated budgets. CEO David Zaslav immediately began slashing costs. HBO Max originals were canceled mid-production. Discovery Plus shows saw budget cuts of 30 to 40%. Paranormal programming took some of the hardest hits. Ghost Adventures survived due to Zach Bagans' lower production costs and loyal fan base, but premium shows like Expedition Unknown faced serious scrutiny. Josh Gates wasn't just the star of multiple shows. He was an executive producer with significant creative control and a substantial salary. Industry sources estimate his total compensation package exceeded $2 million annually when factoring in producing fees, appearance payments, and profit participation. That made him a prime target during restructuring. Discovery executives wanted to renegotiate, offering contract extensions with reduced budgets, smaller crews, and less creative freedom. For Josh, who had spent years building his production infrastructure and creative vision, this was unacceptable. Meanwhile, streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Apple TV Plus were aggressively pursuing established talent with creator-owned deals. Josh watched friends and colleagues jump ship for independent projects with full creative control and back-end participation. The writing was on the wall. Traditional cable networks were dying, and streaming was the future. But Discovery wasn't going down without a fight. Contract negotiations became contentious. Lawyers got involved. Non-compete clauses were scrutinized. Josh found himself trapped between loyalty to a network that launched his career and the opportunity to build something entirely his own in the new media landscape. Here's what Josh Gates has actually been working on while the paranormal community speculated about his absence. Multiple sources confirm he's been in deep negotiations with Amazon Prime Video for a multi-year, creator-owned production deal worth an estimated $15 million. This isn't just another hosting gig. Josh is launching Gates Entertainment Group, an independent production company with full ownership of all intellectual property. The flagship project is a global adventure series tentatively titled Uncharted that combines elements of Expedition Unknown with high-budget documentary filmmaking on par with Planet Earth or Our Planet. We're talking cinematic drone footage, weeks-long expeditions instead of rushed 3-day shoots, and access to locations that Discovery's budget could never accommodate. Josh has been assembling a dream team: Oscar-nominated cinematographers, award-winning editors, and top-tier sound designers. He's poached key crew members from his Discovery shows, offering equity stakes in the production company rather than just salaries. This is a complete reimagining of adventure television. Episodes will run 60 to 90 minutes instead of the 42-minute cable format that requires constant commercial breaks and manufactured cliffhangers. The content will be designed for binge watching, with serialized investigations spanning multiple episodes. Amazon is betting big on this because their data shows adventure and mystery content performs exceptionally well internationally. Josh's global brand recognition and multilingual capabilities make him perfect for worldwide distribution. But here's the kicker: the deal includes a paranormal investigation component separate from the main series. Josh isn't abandoning that world, he's revolutionizing it. Imagine Expedition X, but with 3-week investigations, thermal imaging technology that costs 6 figures, and consultation with actual scientists and historians instead of just psychics and local legends. No more rushed EVP sessions in the dark. This is methodical, well-researched paranormal investigation with real academic rigor. The contract also gives Josh unprecedented creative control. Amazon's hands-off approach means no network executives demanding changes, no advertiser concerns limiting content, and no censorship of controversial topics. Josh can finally investigate locations and stories that Discovery deemed too risky or expensive. The announcement is scheduled for early next year, once legal teams finalize the Discovery exit and non-compete agreements. But word has leaked, and the industry is already buzzing about what this means for adventure television's future. Expedition Unknown is Josh Gates's baby. He created the show, developed its format, and spent a decade building it into Discovery's most successful adventure series. Walking away isn't simple, and contractually it's even more complicated. Josh currently has obligations for 12 more episodes spanning 2 seasons that were greenlit before merger chaos began. Discovery is holding him to every single episode outlined in his contract. They know Expedition Unknown without Josh Gates is worthless, so they're leveraging the show to extract maximum value before he leaves. Here's the current situation. Josh will complete season 12, which is already in post-production and scheduled to air in early 2025. These episodes were filmed before his Amazon negotiations intensified, and they represent classic Expedition Unknown. Josh traveling to exotic locations, investigating historical mysteries, and delivering the enthusiastic narration fans love. But season 13 is where things get messy. Discovery wants 12 episodes. Josh is contractually obligated to deliver, but his heart isn't in it anymore. Filming has been contentious. Budget cuts mean smaller crews, shorter location shoots, and less ambitious investigations. Josh is essentially going through the motions, fulfilling legal requirements while mentally checked out and focused on his Amazon project. Production insiders describe a funeral atmosphere on set. Everyone knows these are the final episodes, and the energy reflects that reality. Discovery executives are desperately trying to develop an Expedition Unknown successor show or find a replacement host, but focus groups have been brutal. Test audiences simply don't connect with other hosts the same way. Josh Gates is Expedition Unknown. His personality, his storytelling ability, and his genuine curiosity are irreplaceable. Without him, the show is just generic travel content in an oversaturated market. There are rumors Discovery might try to continue Expedition Unknown with rotating guest hosts, similar to how Top Gear attempted to replace Jeremy Clarkson. That experiment failed spectacularly, and industry analysts predict the same outcome here. The show's loyal fan base tunes in for Josh, not the concept. Some episodes might feature Phil Torres or other Discovery personalities stepping in, but viewer retention will plummet. Josh's departure creates a massive hole in Discovery's programming lineup. Expedition Unknown consistently ranked in their top 5 shows for viewer engagement and international distribution value. Losing it weakens Discovery Plus significantly, especially when competing against Netflix and Amazon's growing adventure content libraries. For Josh, finishing these contractual obligations feels like closure on an important chapter of his career, while simultaneously being professionally exhausting as he tries to serve 2 masters, honoring old commitments while building his future. Phil Torres found out about Josh's plans the way most of us did, through industry gossip and leaked information, not from Josh directly. That tells you everything about how their relationship deteriorated. Phil built his entire television career around Expedition X. Before partnering with Josh, he was a respected wildlife biologist and science communicator with occasional TV appearances, but nothing approaching mainstream recognition. Expedition X made him a paranormal television personality with a dedicated fan base. Now that foundation is crumbling, and Phil is left scrambling to figure out his next move. Discovery initially planned to cancel Expedition X entirely once Josh's departure became inevitable. Why invest in a paranormal show without the star who brings the audience? But Phil fought back hard. He pitched a complete show reboot with himself as the solo host, bringing in rotating expert guests for each investigation. Think of it as Phil Torres Investigates, rather than the buddy dynamic that defined the original format. Discovery was skeptical but agreed to a trial season with a significantly reduced budget, 6 episodes instead of the usual 12, and Phil had to accept a lower salary and co-executive producer responsibilities without additional pay. It's a tough pill to swallow, doing more work for less money while living in Josh Gates' shadow. The retooled show faces enormous challenges. Expedition X succeeded because of Josh and Phil's chemistry and complementary skills. Josh brought charisma charisma and storytelling experience. Phil provided scientific credibility and genuine expertise. Without Josh, Phil needs to carry episodes entirely on his personality, and early test footage suggests he struggles with that transition. He's knowledgeable and enthusiastic, but lacks Josh's natural on-camera magnetism and comedic timing that kept audiences engaged during slower investigation moments. Phil is also dealing with fan backlash. Online communities are divided between those who support Phil and blame Josh for abandoning the show, and those who see Phil as a replacement rather than a legitimate solo host. It's an impossible position that Phil never asked for but must now navigate. Behind the scenes, Phil is exploring other opportunities. He's been in talks with National Geographic about wildlife documentary projects that leverage his biology background. Travel Channel has expressed interest in a science-based paranormal show that positions Phil as a skeptical investigator who debunks fraudulent claims while remaining open to genuine, unexplained phenomena. These negotiations reveal Phil's smart career strategy: diversify away from dependence on Josh Gates and Discovery. If Expedition X fails without Josh, Phil needs alternatives lined up. Meanwhile, the awkwardness between Phil and Josh is palpable at industry events. They maintain professional courtesy but avoid genuine interaction, a sad ending to what once seemed like authentic friendship built through shared adventures investigating the unknown together. When news of Josh's departure leaked, the paranormal television community erupted with opinions, and they weren't all supportive. Zach Bagans was among the first to respond, posting a cryptic Instagram story that read, "Real investigators stay loyal to the craft, not the paycheck." While he never mentioned Josh by name, everyone understood the implication. Zach has built Ghost Adventures by staying with Travel Channel for over 15 years, and he clearly sees Josh's move as mercenary behavior that prioritizes business over passion. The two have always had a complicated relationship, mutual respect mixed with professional rivalry and fundamentally different approaches to investigation. Amy Bruni and Adam Berry from Kindred Spirits took a more diplomatic stance, wishing Josh well while emphasizing their commitment to Travel Channel and Warner Bros. Discovery. Their measured response makes sense considering they're hoping for contract renewals and can't afford to alienate network executives. But privately, sources say they're frustrated that Josh's high-profile exit might trigger budget cuts affecting their shows as Discovery tightens spending to compensate for lost flagship programming. Steve Gonsalves and Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters offered genuine support, tweeting congratulations about Josh's new venture and praising his courage to pursue creative independence. Having left their own original show over contract disputes years ago, they understand the difficult decision Josh faced between financial security and artistic freedom. Their public endorsement carries weight because they successfully rebuilt careers after leaving sci-fi, proving that life exists beyond network television contracts. The fan reaction has been intensely divided and often brutal. Josh's social media mentions are flooded with betrayal accusations from longtime viewers who feel abandoned. "You built your career on Discovery's platform and now you're walking away?" One viral tweet demanded. Others celebrated his bold move, arguing that talented creators deserve ownership of their work and shouldn't be trapped by corporate contracts that limit their potential. Reddit became a battlefield of competing Josh Gates megathreads, analyzing every aspect of the situation. YouTube paranormal channels cranked out reaction videos with clickbait titles ranging from "Josh Gates destroys his legacy" to "Josh Gates makes genius business move." Everyone had an opinion, and most weren't shy about sharing it. The controversy extended beyond paranormal circles into broader entertainment industry discussions about streaming disruption, creator rights, and the collapse of traditional cable television models. Trade publications like Variety and Hollywood Reporter ran features positioning Josh's departure as symptomatic of larger industry shifts, where established talent increasingly rejects network deals for streaming independence and intellectual property ownership that builds long-term wealth rather than just collecting paychecks. The leaked details about Josh's Amazon project paint a picture of something genuinely revolutionary in adventure television. Uncharted will operate on a budget reportedly exceeding $2 million per episode, nearly 5 times what Discovery allocated for Expedition Unknown's final seasons. That money translates into production quality that rivals theatrical documentaries rather than cable reality programming. We're talking red digital cinema cameras capturing in 8K resolution, professional drone operators shooting cinematic establishing shots, and color grading that makes every frame look like National Geographic photography. Josh has partnered with several A-list production talents who bring serious credibility. James Cameron's documentary team is consulting on underwater expedition episodes. Werner Herzog's longtime cinematographer is attached as director of photography for select investigations. The audio design team won an Emmy for their work on Planet Earth 2. This isn't television talent. These are film industry professionals who typically work on projects that premiere at Sundance and Tribeca, not shows that stream on demand. The format itself breaks from traditional adventure television structure. Instead of standalone 42-minute episodes, Uncharted will feature serialized arcs spanning 4 to 6 episodes per investigation. Imagine spending an entire month in Papua New Guinea researching cargo cult origins, with episodes that build on previous discoveries, rather than resetting each week. This allows for genuine depth and complexity impossible in Discovery's commercial break-friendly format that demands manufactured suspense every 8 minutes. Investigations will incorporate serious academic research. Josh is partnering with universities and research institutions, bringing actual archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians on expeditions, instead of just local guides and enthusiastic amateurs. The show will present multiple perspectives on mysteries, acknowledging uncertainty, rather than forcing definitive conclusions for narrative satisfaction. This represents a more intellectually honest approach to mystery investigation that respects audience intelligence. The paranormal component operates under similar principles. Rather than rushing through locations collecting questionable EVP recordings, investigations will span weeks using state-of-the-art equipment. Thermal imaging arrays costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, seismographic monitoring to distinguish paranormal claims from environmental factors, consultation with physicists about electromagnetic phenomena before jumping to supernatural conclusions. Josh wants to bring scientific rigor to paranormal investigation while remaining open to genuinely unexplained occurrences. Amazon's global distribution strategy means Uncharted will launch simultaneously in over 200 countries with subtitles in 40 languages. The international scope allows Josh to investigate locations previously inaccessible due to Discovery's limited international production infrastructure. Filming has already begun in Mongolia, Iceland, and Peru, with expeditions planned for Antarctica, Bhutan, and remote Pacific islands. The scale and ambition dwarf anything Josh accomplished at Discovery, representing his ultimate vision, finally realized without corporate limitations constraining creative possibilities. Josh Gates leaves Discovery having fundamentally shaped adventure television for an entire generation. Before Destination Truth premiered in 2007, paranormal investigation meant grainy footage of people whispering in the dark. Josh brought humor, skepticism, and genuine storytelling craft to the genre. Expedition Unknown elevated travel programming beyond generic tourism into legitimate historical investigation with narrative depth and educational value. His influence appears in countless shows that copied his format: enthusiastic host, exotic locations, blend of education and entertainment. He legitimized adventure television as respectable programming rather than cheap reality filler. That's an impressive legacy regardless of how his Amazon gamble plays out. But some argue he's abandoning the network that gave him opportunities when he was unknown. Discovery took risks on Destination Truth and funded his growth from enthusiastic amateur to polished professional. Others see his move as smart business. Why sacrifice career opportunities for corporate interests that slashed budgets and reduced creative freedom? The real test comes when Uncharted launches. If it succeeds, Josh becomes a visionary who correctly identified streaming's future and inspired other creators to pursue independence. His legacy transforms into that of an industry disruptor. But if Uncharted fails to find an audience or doesn't deliver on its ambitious promises, Josh will be remembered as someone who overestimated his importance and made a catastrophic mistake walking away from guaranteed success. The paranormal community has long memories, and failure would permanently damage his reputation, making any television return extremely difficult.